Hi everyone, welcome along to today's session on getting up to speed with Tatara TXP. Now, as we wait for everyone else who signed up to get up to speed themselves and joining us, we'll just start off with a few quick introductions and a summary of what we're going to share with you all today as well. So, hello, I'm Johnny, and joining me as co-host today, but the person who's probably going to do most of the sharing and talking is my colleague Kenny.
Hey, how you doing, everybody?
Thanks, Kenny, and thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join us as well. This webinar is for you, and whilst we can't hear you audibly, you do have the ability to ask questions as we go along. For those joining us live and not watching a recording, if you do look down the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see an option to ask us a question. We'd love your interaction. The more questions, the better. And we'll either provide a response to the question in the chat, or we'll group any similar questions together to discuss at different intervals throughout, or potentially at the end if we have time. Okay. So we do have quite a lot to share with you today, and when we looked at all the new features in Tatara TXP, we quickly realized it was just too much for a single session. So this is going to be the first of a three-part series of webinars. So today's session very much focused on sharing a quick overview and introduction to Tatara TXP, which will be a new acronym for many of you, but quite an exciting one as well. We'll provide a high-level overview of all the new functionality enhanced features before we get into the detail of any specific features in version 13 of Tatara Learn and the new native mobile app that was also released as part of TXP. And finally, as I said, we do hope to have some time at the end to pose any final questions, but do feel free to ask them as we go along. And if we can't get through all the questions posted in time, we'll certainly follow up directly afterwards, or we'll find a way to share the relevant questions with you all as well. So I can see a few more people have joined us. I see quite a number of familiar names, organizations, some new ones there as well. You're all very welcome. For those maybe not as familiar with Synergy Learning, very kind of quickly, we are a leading Tatara and Moodle partner for over 15 years now. And we support many different types of organizations across most industries in really kind of getting the best from their learning technology. We aim to kind of really deliver the learning experience and outcomes that really align with their learning and development needs there too. So having supported over 1,000 platform implementations in that time and enhancements, we do bring quite an extensive level of experience and useful insight. We certainly think to all of our customers, with a handful kind of shown on the screen now, and I can see some of you in the session as well today. So thanks again for yourselves for joining us. And talking about customers and projects, we're delighted every time we're kind of selected and picked as being the partner of choice for a number of organizations, and we're really excited that two of our customer implementations won Best Project awards in the Tatara Awards last month. So delighted to share that success with both Western Union and Knott's Fire and Rescue, and who knows what we're about to share next. In addition to extending your capabilities for improving your learning and development, it might even help you win an award in future years as well. So we'll get started. I think most people are in, so we'll get started. And to kind of kick things off, we're just going to quickly look at what is TXP. And I think before we really look at that, it's important to also kind of look back a little bit as well, especially with so many of our kind of current customers who are on different versions of Tatara on this session today. We do want to bring everybody up to the latest version of version 13 of TXP, so you can really take advantage of the platform's full capabilities. So you could be on recent or slightly older versions of Tatara, and here we can really see in the past, with version 9, version 10, we had these kind of annual releases. We had a very special release of version 11 for that very exciting stage of GDPR. So that kind of came out a little earlier than planned, and it meant that we had a little bit of a delayed release of version 12 later in the same year as well. And we've got this, we'll call it, it's a bit unfair to call it a big gap of almost kind of, I suppose, 2 calendar years between version 12 and what is version 13. And the reason for that longer period, it wasn't due to Brexit or pandemic. It was all about creating something unique that really addressed new and emerging needs for enhanced learning and development for organizations. There are critically important areas for organizations and individuals themselves to really kind of thrive and succeed. And we've seen this increased need for a wider learning engagement, collaboration with peers, high performance needs, and ultimately a more personalized and productive approach to learning. And that's really what Tatara TXP brings. So Tatara TXP being the talent experience platform, and at the heart of the TXP is the platform we all know and love, is Tatara Learn, a really powerful LMS that has been a game changer for many organizations over the years, and it now has a fully integrated suite of products that really kind of complement each other. We've got Tatara Perform for the performance management and appraisals, and we also now have Tatara Engage as the learning experience platform there too. And the 3 parts of the talent experience platform really combine really well to unlock the full potential of your organization's people, ensuring they learn, they engage, and they perform to really kind of deliver where it counts as well. So looking specifically at Tatara Learn as the next one here too, it is that learning management system that, again, is trusted by thousands of customers and many of you watching this webinar already. And it really upskills your workforce in the way you want, with quite a bit of power and flexibility to deliver that transformational learning. We're going to learn more about the enhancements in version 13 from Kenny shortly, so I won't stay too much of his thunder, but we have seen some fantastic new features and a lot of enhancements, and I know there's a lot in there that many of you have been asking for some time as well, so really excited to share that with you. With Tatara Perform as well, Tatara Engage, we do have a brand new product effectively, which really kind of provides the power of kind of collaboration and informal learning in your organizations to support a higher performance. It provides a really kind of enriching collaborative environment for your employees that they can discover and share resources like they can't do currently. They can share know-how, expertise that they've kind of captured themselves, and it also promotes a much more kind of engaging learning experience for them as well. So in facilitating that knowledge sharing, it really kind of expands opportunities for your employees to learn new skills, improve their performance, and also be more productive as well. And the 3rd part of TXP is Tatara Perform, and it has been part of Tatara Learn previously, up to version 12, but what we've seen is something that's been built from the ground up, with greater flexibility. Productivity really sits at its core, and it really kind of covers the entire spectrum of traditional and more modern performance practices. So that includes like your annual reviews, continuous performance enhancements, 360 feedback, check-ins, appraisals, much more in there as well. And it does enable organizations to really harness the power of that continuous performance management that boosts that in-office or remote workplace productivity anytime, anywhere, which is becoming more essential as we see many organizations in the news recently consider new ways of hybrid or remote working as well. So again, this fits perfectly in with what's happening in our own organizations as well. So Tatara TXP, it is made up of those 3 separate platforms. We do have the native app that sits in there as well, but the great thing with this is that you can have one of the platforms if that's all you need for your own kind of needs, or you can have a combination of one and another, or you can have all 3, whichever provides the most value for your organization. And together as a platform, as a suite, they really do unify a transformational learning management system, bringing that user-centric learning experience platform with Engage and that kind of comprehensive performance management system under a single architecture that's quite adaptable to your own kind of needs as well. That flexibility that we know and love from Tatara Learn is contained inside all 3 of those products as well. So quick insight to what TXP actually is, and as I mentioned already, there's too much to cover in one session, so we have broken out and we're doing a series. So over the next 2 weeks, on the 18th and 25th of March, same time as we're sharing this now, we're going to focus on Tatara Engage and then again on Tatara Perform. So again, what will happen is I think following this, you'll get a link to the recording of the video, and within that email, you're going to have a link to register if you haven't done already, if you'd like to attend those particular sessions. They are a little bit shorter than this one. Again, we want to take the right amount of time to cover the key features, not just in how you can kind of use it, but how you can kind of use them together as a potential talent experience platform as well. So we will look at it as individual platforms, but also how they combine quite well with Tatara Learn. But for now, listen, well, I'm going to hand over to Kenny. He's going to do most of the talking for the rest of the session. I'll be sitting here to kind of answer or capture your questions for discussion. So any comments, questions you have, please use that panel to the right-hand side, and we'll be delighted to kind of help you out. So over to you, Kenny, for now.
Thank you. Thanks, Johnny. Okay, so as it won't be possible to cover all features and functionality of Tatara Learn TXP in the time we have, I'm actually going to focus on a number of areas. I sort of highlighted these in bold on the slide here. So the first is multi-tenancy. This is a specific TXP feature supporting the ability to set up users into distinct tenants and provide separation of user management, enrollment, and reporting for Tatara Learn. Some multi-tenancy features or aspects are also applied to Perform and Engage, though as John was saying, we're not going to cover them today. The next thing I'm going to look at is seminar improvements, and seminars are used to support management and scheduling of learning events on the platform. The next thing we're going to look at is improvements to the report builder. And the report builder really is a way to configure reports for different reporting audiences on the platform. And the last thing that I'm going to cover is the mobile app. So this is also a specific feature for TXP, providing a native mobile app for online and offline learning support. So, moving on to the first area of discussion, multi-tenancy. Before we look at what the functionality is in TXP, we need to look at what multi-tenancy really is. So Wikipedia defines this as a software architecture in which a single instance of software runs on a server and serves multiple tenants. Now, that's a very technical definition, obviously, but essentially multi-tenancy is where a group of users or a tenant share common access to software, but in a limited way, provided really in a walled garden. In terms of an LMS, it means a single instance of the platform, where users are managed separately in individual tenants by tenant administrators. So tenant users will have access to learning available maybe just for their tenant or shared across other tenants. Reporting data would be absolutely limited to the users of a single tenant. Now, pre-Tatara TXP, this could be partially achieved using organizational hierarchies, dashboards, custom menus, audience visibility rules, specific report configuration. Really, that would usually be through global restrictions and locking down permissions on the platform. But without really additional development, this would limit certain features of the site. For example, user management really would need to be controlled centrally. So what's the use cases for multi-tenancy in the context of an LMS? So the first use case might be a single company with multiple departments or divisions. And that's where you'd have different user groups managed separately. Each would have their different learning requirements and reporting lines. Learners from one department or division can probably still interact with learners from other departments or divisions. The next use case might be a single site shared by discrete companies or organizations. In this case, there would need to be a walled garden between tenants. Users and learning management would be in isolated tenants and controlled by their tenant administrators. Global administration would be carried out by the site administrator. There wouldn't be really any shared learning across tenants. The last use case might be a training provider, and in this case, there would be a requirement for shared learning across tenants. User management and enrollment still controlled by the tenant administrators, but there would be shared learning, and you might have centrally provided trainers across the courses. Now, so this diagram here really illustrates probably the most likely use case for multi-tenancy in the LMS context. So you might have multiple divisions, each having their own tenant administrator or tenant admin. They would be responsible for managing the users, responsible for managing the enrollment, only see reports for their tenant. They might have their distinct specific training for their division, but there might be a shared catalogue across all of the different divisions. So what about multi-tenancy in TXP? So in previous versions of Toda, there are a number of contexts where permissions and settings are applied: system, category, course, activity. If you're familiar and are a site administrator in Toda, you'll know what I mean in that respect. In TXP, a new context has been added called tenant context, and this is to support the multi-tenancy and the application of permissions across the LMS itself. In respect to Toda Learn, a tenant can have its own courses, its own users, programs, certifications, audiences, and other multi-tenancy aspects such as the dashboard and report will still be required to facilitate multi-tenancy. Learning content might be shared, or it might be tenant specific. So multi-tenancy is by default is disabled in TXP, so you have to enable it, and that's done under configure features, shared services settings. Once enabled for the site, a new menu item will appear under the admin quick menu. We'll look at that in a wee second on a live site. This will display once you select the tenant option. This will display the list of tenants enabled on the site, and that will display their name, the number of participants they have, the user managers, the domain managers. We'll look at that what they are in a second, and whether it's suspended or not. You can edit the details of it and delete a tenant. By the way, deleting a tenant, it gives you a few different options actually. So you can either suspend all the members, delete all the members, or keep the tenant user, but move them into so they're no longer a tenant member. And so those users that are moved out of a tenancy are classified as system users, and that means they're not actually restricted to any tenant boundaries. So when you're adding a tenant, what do you need to provide? Well, you need to have a name, identifier. Each tenant has a category, an audience, a specific tenant for the tenant, and a dashboard. And when you're setting up a tenant, you can actually clone an already existing dashboard for that tenant. So this is the interface you see. It's a very simple interface when you're setting up a tenant, but there's a number of important fields. So the tenant identifier. So this can actually be used as part of a URL to display tenant branding on the homepage or the login page pre-login, but it also actually require a feature to be turned on for the sites called pre-login tenant themes. And you put a URL, the tenant identifier in the URL. The other important field is the category name. So this is where all the learning will be organized for that specific tenant. So when you're creating that, creating a tenant, it actually will create a new course category for the tenant, and you can set the name here. If you leave it blank, it'll take the name of the actual tenant itself. And another important field is the tenant audience name. So when a new tenant is created, it does set up a new set audience, and all the tenant members are put into that. This is created at the category context and is used to control access, for example, to the tenant's dashboard by the tenants. As I mentioned a minute ago, there's two types of administrators. So the first one is the user manager. Now, as you can imagine, it's relating to manage the users of a tenant. So they're responsible for creating user accounts, uploading users, updating users, suspending users, resetting the passwords, for example, or deleting accounts. The domain manager, they're really for managing the tenant audiences, managing courses, programs, and certifications for the tenant, so you can actually create them, and manage the enrollment onto those learning aspects. They can also be allowed to manage the tenant branding as well. We'll cover that in a minute. So in relation to tenant users, there's two types. So there's a tenant member and a tenant participant. So a tenant member, these users, they can only be a member of one tenant at a time. And their accounts are usually managed by the tenant user manager. And their access to the site is actually suspended when you suspend the tenant. In relation to the tenant participant, these users aren't associated with one specific tenant, but they will require, because they require access across a number of tenants, they need to get added to the tenant. So for example, you might have a trainer who's delivering courses across a range of tenants. They need to have access to those tenant courses, for example. So this is the interface that a user manager might see when they're managing the users. Note that there, by the way, there's another option that appears on this for the site administrator to add non-participant members. User manager can't add in non-participant members. So I'm just going to quickly show you that how that looks in Tellura itself. So when you turn on, I'm just logged in as administrator on this site. When you turn on multi-tenancy, up in the quick launcher, there's a tenant option here. This appears. When I go there, it shows me the list of tenants that are created on the site. I can create a new tenant. I can look at the different participants of a tenant. If I go back just 1 second, so that's where you would upload users and create users. Also, this area, this shows you the current user managers for the site and the domain managers for managing enrollments. And you can go and edit the details or delete the specific tenant. So you suspend a tenant by editing the details, and you can go and delete a tenant if you need to, and you can choose what you want to do for the users who are members of that tenant. If you actually look at a user who is a participant of the tenant, if I look at their profile, as an administrator, you can actually see what tenant they belong to, and you can actually change their tenancy here if you really want to do that as well. So that's just a very quick look at what's the sort of the tenant interface and management interface for tenancy in Tellura TXP. So let's move on. So HR import, if you're not familiar with HR import, what it is, that's a means for to provide an integration with your HR system. So you can provide automation of adding users and syncing user details, updating your organization hierarchy, your position hierarchy, and assigning job assignments, and even adding competencies. So it's potentially an automated integration. So to support the multi-tenancy aspect, you can now indicate for users whether they're a tenant member, what tenant member they're of, and the same for a participant. In relation to tenant audiences, when multi-tenancy is enabled, users, as I mentioned, the domain manager is responsible for managing and configuring audience for the tenant. So audience created by the domain manager can be used as, like any other audience. You can assign learning via that, or control visibility of learning, for example, in the catalog. These audiences probably will really need to be set audiences for the domain manager, because dynamic audiences are limited at present for the domain manager. Note, by the way, audience members can be both the tenant member and the participant type. If you want complete isolation between tenants, there's an experimental feature you can turn on. It's called isolation mode. When isolation mode is on, the learning content and users in each tenant are completely separate from each other, from other tenants. When turned on, obviously, so if a user is in one tenant, they only see their courses or learning catalog items, for example, for their tenant. Even if a learner is enrolled on shared courses, those courses will become unavailable for them. Obviously, if you disable the feature, the shared learning will become available again to them. In relation to reporting, obviously it's important to configure reports very carefully, as you can imagine. You don't want any data from one tenant leaking across to another tenant. For the moment in TXP, tenant admins don't have permission to create reports. This can only be done by the site administrator. However, to support tenant-specific reporting, a number of improvements have been made. There is a new content restriction for TXP that can be applied on report builder reports, and we're going to be covering improvements in report builder reports in a wee minute or two. So I'll describe what that is in more detail, what a report builder report is. These report builder reports have a feature called content restrictions. That means you can actually limit the reporting data displayed on a report. So, for example, if you were a staff manager and you had access to a course completion report, you'd only see your team members. So following that same principle, a content restriction has been added to report builder reports called enforce user visibility restrictions. And if that's applied to the report, it means that tenant reporting viewers, the ones seeing the report, can only see records for their tenant members. In addition, actually, some of the other reporting sources have a means to filter the data by tenant. So that might be useful for site administrators. In relation to tenant branding, which might be important, there's a new theme in TXP called Ventura. And this supports sub-branding by tenant. So these theme configurations can be actually done, as I mentioned previously, by the domain manager. So they can provide their own custom branding in the site and override the default theme configuration. So the configurable elements that they have to choose from is adding a logo, a favicon, which is the wee icon that appears in the tab in your browser. Overriding the color scheme, so you might have the text color or link color, for example, or button color. Login page image, so that's before you log in, there's a banner that can be displayed on the login page, and footer content. So the final slide on multi-tenancy in TXP, on this, I'd just like to flag some of the limitations that are currently there. So hopefully they'll be addressed in later versions. So there's no support for organizational position hierarchy management by tenant admin. They're really just user management in relation to users. Job assignment management, it really sort of still relies on the site admin role rather than the tenant admins. And it's not possible for tenant domain managers to set rule sets for dynamic rules. As I mentioned, they were quite limited a minute ago. So that really means that you can only rely on set audiences, at least when you're a domain manager. Report configuration, as I mentioned the last slide, has to be done really by site administrators. And if you are in a large site and you're looking to use caching, this won't function in multi-tenancy mode. And report caching is a feature allowing a report to be generated as a background task, so that when you're viewing the report, the data is sourced from the cache. It's not relying on a real-time query. And this would obviously improve the speed of the display of a report, particularly when you've got large data sets. So that's the first section I'd like to cover on multi-tenancy. Johnny, is there any questions you would like to get answered at this point?
Got plenty of questions. Thank you very much, everybody, for submitting your questions through. A nice kind of simple one for you, Kenny. Is there a limit to the number of tenants you can have?
I'm not aware of that. No, there isn't.
I don't believe there is on that either. Are reports held at the site level, and can a report be shared across multiple tenants and restricted accordingly? Good question.
Yes, it can. So you can create a report. So to give a user access to a report, you need to. There's a configuration tab on each report builder report you say which role has access to that particular report. So if you were a staff manager, you can set that this particular report is available in this at a user or any context. And if you're in that role as staff manager, you could see access. You could have access to that report. So you would control the reports by role on the site, and you could make that available to, for example, the domain manager or user manager, for example. And but then you would have to enable that enforced restriction of visibility to make sure that the reporting data is based by that tenant.
Excellent. Thank you, Kenny. They're coming in thick and fast here at the minute. So does each tenant require its own HR import, or can you populate them in a single HR import?
You can populate them in a single import. You can't specifically say that this HR import configuration is for one tenant and a different HR import configuration for another tenant. So the structure would have to be the same. So it's more, the HR import configuration at the minute for multi-tenancy is probably aligned to more that common usage use case that I mentioned, where you have multiple divisions rather than having separate sources. If that answers your question.
Excellent, thank you. Can the different tenancies have different user provisioning? As an example, self-register with approval.
No, not at the minute. I think you would only have to have you can only have self-registration for this art.
Perfect. And I do see we do have somebody from Twitter on the call. Maybe they could take that as a bit of feedback, potentially back as well.
Possibly.
Possibly as well. Okay, thank you. We do have another one here, and they do mention there's 3 types of, you brought on the screen 3 types of options for tenants. Can you have an instance with mixed tenants?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry.
I wasn't too sure. I was reading through that myself. What we might follow up with you individually on that, and quite specific, and we'll see if there's anything that we can help with. One final one I say, and more pop in. What effect does this have on the storage capacity of the site? Does this use additional storage for the setup?
I wouldn't say that it would. The storage requirements for a Twitter environment are all related to the amount of users you have on the platform, and the amount of usage of the platform, the amount of courses and learnings uploaded to the platform. So it's based on that rather than, so if you have lots of users, doesn't matter whether in one tenant or another tenant, and lots of courses, it's still going to be the same storage, It's minimal difference, I would say.
Okay, perfect. We do have one question. I think we've kind of answered both. It says SSO and HR sync. Is this configurable at tenant level? So I think we know SSO is not configurable individually. Just on
that point, if you did have OAuth, for example, you could have different OAuth providers for different tenants, but they would probably see that option on the login page. But it is possible to have different OAuth methodologies. And same if you had, for example, SAML, you could technically have different IDPs for SAML for SSO, but it's probably less flexible for SAML.
Brilliant. And on the mixed tenancy, yes, we will follow up with you. We're happy to share the slides as well after this, but we'll kind of catch up with you individually. One final one, Kenny, then we'll move on if that's okay. You love these questions. What is the relationship between tenants and organizations? Can a tenant contain multiple organizations?
Yes, so organizational hierarchies are not linked specifically to tenants at the minute, no. So you could have multiple frameworks of organization within one tenant, but you'd still have to manage some way to manage that. So either by HR import, or you would have to do that by site administrator manually uploading.
Excellent. Right, we'll stop the quick fire questions at you, Kenny, and we'll let you get on to the next bit as well. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So the next thing I'm going to look at is a seminar management improvements. Okay, so I think I better just cover what seminar management is if you're not familiar with it. In respect to Twitter, that is. Anyway, so a seminar activity is part of a course, and it's used for scheduling training events, allowing users to book on them. And a course kind of is as many really of seminar activities as you want. And each activity instance or seminar activity instance, they can have multiple events, and users can sign up to these events. And it's possible to configure approval workflow for sign up if required. You can also have waiting lists and declare interest, and these are also supported. For each event, you can have more than one session, and each session can have its associated locations or rooms, assets, and facilitators. And that facilitators actually is a new feature in TXP. I mean, the seminar activity also has a range of automated notifications, such as when the user booking is confirmed, or sending out a reminder, or when an event is cancelled, for example. And by the way, the booking notification can include an iCal attachment, so that the event is added to the user's calendar. So there's been a number of UX improvements made in TXP, and the main changes are really on the event listing page on the course overview, the event listing on the activity. It's also providing improved filtering options, and the sign up form. And this is in the new layout with the sign up action box. So just to give you a feel for the action differences between earlier versions in TXP, I'm going to do a comparison between Toto 12 and TXP. I'm going to start with the course overview page. So this is a screenshot of a course overview page, and the seminar activity has been configured to show the events on the course overview page. And you can see that it's showing you the date and time zone, date of the event. If there was a room associated with it, it would be shown. In this case, it's blank. The number of seats that are available, what's the booking status, and then there's a link off to sign up if it's still available for booking. And that will link off to the sign up form. So in TXP, there's now a different way, as you can see. So there's different fields displayed to the learner, and the user action, and the user action really at this point is to go to the event and see the details of the event, and you can sign up for that page. And it displays the event status, number of seats, the session times, you have multiple times, the date and time, and what time zone it is in if you have it enabled for the site, what rooms are associated with it, and facilitators. We'll go into facilitators in a minute. So when you actually go into the activity, this is what it looks like on Toto 12. There's no filtering options available, at least not by default. The room filter can be configured, and any empty columns of information are actually still shown. In TXP, it's a bit different. It has now a whole range of new filters: event status, booking status, rooms, facilitators, and you can see the columns are different as well. So there's similar to what was displayed on the previous slide. Mind you, it would be useful if there was ability to add custom fields as filters for events, but that's not supported yet. The event listing hopefully is now more distinguishable, and the list of columns are now more relevant for the user. And what you can do is, if there's a column that across all events that doesn't have anything to display, you can hide it, giving it a better view. So this is the booking form in Toto 12. You can see it shows you a couple of bits of details about the event, and it allows you to determine whether you want to receive an iCal attachment with the invite. In TXP, event details is now including a lot more information, plus a sign-up form on the right-hand side in the sign-up action box. And by the way, any sign-up fields configured will appear in this box for the site. The cancel booking form actually appears in the same place too. But I mean, the sign-up process really hasn't changed. So you can limit the number of times a user can sign up to an event. Restrict subsequent sign-ups to user for particular event by event attendance status, for example, no-show, and indicate what approval workflow you might want for the sign-up process. So you might want, for example, manager approval or accepting the terms and conditions of the event. So this is just to show you that this is a cancel booking form for reference, by the way, so it's showing on the right-hand side. Now, if you are logged in as an administrator or course manager, the action icons for each event that was shown for each in Toto 12, these have now been replaced with a context menu, as you can see. And there's also an additional filter that can be used to indicate which events need attendance to be taken. So when you're actually managing events, you can now assign multiple rooms to each session, which is a great plus. Previously it was one. It's also possible to manage facilitators for each session of an event. Now, facilitators are really those people who are delivering the session or supporting the session. And these these are actually managed similar to the way that rooms and assets are managed globally, usually. So there's two types of facilitators. There's internal and external. So an internal one is where it's linked to an existing user account on the site, but mind you, those can only be managed globally by site administrators. And then there's also externals, as I mentioned a second ago. But these are not linked to any existing account on the LMS, so you can create them at the activity level, or event level, sorry. And for both, you can provide a bio. So when you click the link on the event listing, you'll see that bio. And like other assets and rooms, you can have also custom fields, allowing you to provide additional information about them in an organized manner. Okay. Oh, yes. Just you can also still make it. There's also a range of reports, reporting sources for facilitators, so that you can help them manage them globally too. So slide was just waiting for that to catch up. So there's a new attendance status available. So previously it was fully attended, partially attended, no show. Now there's an option for unable to attend. So this can be used by a learner if they have a valid reason not to attend an event or a session. Status, the sort of status will be used on reports, for example. Now, so when you're actually taking attendance, you can indicate when you're configuring the activity itself when attendance needs to be taken. So, for example, at the beginning of the final session of the event, at the end of the final session, beginning of the first session of the event, or you can mark it at any time. And you can even now upload attendance by CSV. So this could be useful, I would imagine, and when you have a large number of attendees. On this feature around, there's quite a few bits and pieces on attendance tracking, by the way. So you can enable for the activity and manual grading when you're checking attendance. So you can provide a score, and that score is stored in the gradebook for the user. You can even set a passing grade for the seminar activity. And as you can see, that's done when you're checking attendance. What else you can do is now, and you have to enable this as a feature, is take attendance for each session of an event. So as I mentioned earlier, a seminar event can have multiple sessions. So when this is enabled for the activity, you can see an overview like this report of all the different sessions and how many the user has attended or not attended, etc. And you can then also take a final event attendance status. And the event grade can also be taken if you have that enabled for the activity itself. And when you're taking attendance, so there's the overall selection of the event, and then for each session itself. So I would imagine this, that would provide a lot of flexibility for course administrators to accommodate different delivery models of their events. Like the event level attendance, you can actually indicate for each session when attendance should be taken. And there's three options: the beginning of a session, the end of a session, and marking at any time. And so that might be useful if the time frame between sessions is weeks or days apart. If you are a course administrator or marking attendance, you can see on the listing when attendance is to be taken for the event level or for the session level. When configuring rooms, by the way, you can add a virtual room link. So when the room is assigned to a session, a user will view the details of the virtual room for the event page on the event page like this. And it will display a message 15 minutes up to before the session, this type of message. And then when you actually have it's within the 15 minutes of the start date of the session, it will then show a join now button like this. So when that's clicked, and if you provided the right link to your web conference installation, then it'll open that, and so that can be Zoom or MS Teams, for example. By the way, this Join Now button is only available to the actual people who are booked onto the event. So, comment today. This is the last slide for relation to seminars. Activity improvements. yes, there's a few across the board, but in Tora 12, you could mark attendance, mark activity completion based on required view of the activity, required grade. So that obviously this now provides the support for passing grade, and require status, so partial attendance. So there's now a new option, require event over 4. Now the terminology there is a bit difficult to understand what that means, but it means that for a user to be marked as complete for the activity, their related event must have finished a number of days ago, whatever you define it here. So that allows you to delay a user being marked as complete on the activity itself, even though they've met the criteria. And just a few other wee bits and pieces on seminars. Past events are now ordered with the closest events in the past first, rather than oldest events last. And as I mentioned, there's a number of reporting sources, new reporting sources, because you need to be able to manage facilitators globally. And some of the reports that are normally available normally would have been static reports within seminar activity, such as the waiting list or declare interest reports. These are now being converted to embedded reports, so you can configure what columns and filters here. So Johnny, I'm just conscious of time here and what we have. Do we want to take any questions on seminar or leave it to the end?
Sure. I know you love a good question, random question thrown in as well. But listen, I'm actually really pleased myself. I've managed to answer most of them, I think, that are in there.
Okay,
we can follow up. So you can carry on with the next part as well.
No problem, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so next, report builder improvements. So just before I go into the improvements, just a wee quick summary on what report builder feature is within Tora Learn. So this feature has been available really since the early versions of Tora. And the main purpose is to allow site administrators to configure reports for different user groups or audiences. And that's not just the audiences that are within Tora. For example, creating a course completion report for a departmental manager, and then making sure that they only see the users in their departmental structure based on the organization hierarchy. And so there are two types of reports in Tora. Report builder reports, that is. So user-generated reports, and these reports are set up by administrators, and as I mentioned, made available to other users, and then embedded reports. And these are embedded across the application, and what you can do is configure them. For example, the browse list of users, which many site administrators will be very familiar with, is actually a configurable report builder report. So for both types, they're based on a reporting source. And in TXP, there's actually 80 reporting sources. I was quite surprised it was that many. So I was very pleasantly surprised. And these are all related to different types of sources, so to do with certifications or courses or learning completions or seminar management or users. And each reporting source, it's possible to configure the columns that appear on the report, what filters are available, content restrictions that are applied. So I mentioned the content restrictions previously, and what roles can see the report, and whether it's a graphical report or not. So previously, when you were, if you had access to reports on the platform, you click the reports view, you would see that your reports as a list. Now it's displayed graphically in a new visual layout. So each report is represented by a tile and an image, although you can switch between tile view and this view. And this particular image represents whether it has a graph associated with it or not. And you can see in this example, there's two you'll have. There's a bar graph and a donut, progress donut. So just to say, there actually is two new graphical report types, donut and progress donut. And we'll look at one in a second. So it's also now possible to create a report directly from your user list of reports, rather than go through the administration area. You obviously still have the capability. You need to have the capability to create a new report in the first place. So that actually is a good shortcut. The graphing engine behind the report builder reports has also been improved, giving a more cleaner and modern feel. As you can see in this example, I've tried to show a comparison between Tora 12 and Tora TXP. The difference of a similar reports. This is based on the log activity on the site. So you can see it's a smoother graphing. This is an example of a progress donut. It's very like a pie graph showing a percentage of completion. You can, like these type of graphical reports, you can actually customize the colors, the fonts, the background color per graph. And there's also a global setting now to define the default colors used on graphical reports. This is actually quite a handy feature. Previously, before TXP, you could when you applied filters to a report, you could save those applied filters as a saved search, and you could basically allow you a shortcut to apply filters in the drop down. So you have as many saved filters if you wanted, but you could use that on the report directly, or then use that particular saved search to display reports on dashboards in a limited way, so it's giving you exact information that you want. And what you now can do is actually set up, indicate that a specific saved search is actually the default view for when you look at the report. So that means when anybody seeing the report from the reports tab will see the default view. And that obviously will save you time and giving you access to what you need straight away, rather than you having to go in and select even the save search option or apply the filters again. This is the last slide we have in the reports, by the way, for now. So this is the Create Report interface. So if you click the Create Report button, it's also been updated to a much more visual interface. So you can actually now search for specific reports by faceted search on the left-hand side, or by free text search. So I mean, that's, if you're familiar with the grid-based search on for courses and programs and certifications, it's very similar. Though you can't configure what options appear here. So this basically gives you an easier way to find what report you want to create. And it obviously has the tell view, indicating, as previously mentioned, it shows you what type of graph might be configured for it. There's also an option to create specific reports from preset templates. These have been found potentially useful for site administrators before. So these are broken down by three types: administrator, learner, and manager. So, for example, learner, you might have a learner course completion status overview report, or a manager having something similar for his team. Johnny, this is the end of this section. Is there any questions, or just again conscious that we've only 8 minutes left of this period?
Yep, listen, there's been plenty of questions. Thank you, everybody. I can't believe the amount of love heart emojis given towards reporting. Some very excited individuals around data and report charts. So delighted to see that. But listen, we've got all the questions answered so far. So listen, carry on with the mobile app, and we've got hopefully we get some time at the end for any questions.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Tom. Okay, so the last section we're going to cover is the mobile app. So the Totara app, it supports both Android and iOS. It will support the 3 main learning types on Totara, the courses, programs, and certifications. In addition, it provides offline support for SCORMs, though through its native SCORM player. By the way, other standard activities you can use in the app, but only when you're online. As part of the desktop profile, if you log into Totara Video Desktop, you can see a user can manage their desktop device, their mobile device, connected mobile devices, and you can force log out from all devices if you want to do that. If you want push notifications, they are supported, but you need to configure the Totara Air Notifier messenger service for the site, and you will require an app code, which can only be requested for sites that have a valid Totara subscription. And it is possible to configure some elements of branding for your site's app, so the mobile app logo, the primary color, and text color. When you have a Totara instance, by default, the mobile app access is disabled, so you have to enable that. That's done through plugins, mobile settings, and once you've enabled it, you need to decide how users actually log into the app, and you have 3 choices. There's native, which is basically logging in via the app itself, and we'll show you an example of that in a second. There's the web view, and this opens an embedded login page on the app itself, and then mobile browser. So users are, if this is the last option is enabled, by the way, the users are directed to their mobile browser to complete authentication actions before being redirected back to the app. You can also define the length of time before the user needs to re-authenticate. Actually, by default, it's never, but you can change that. And when you have this mobile app enabled for the site, there is now an extra setting that appears in the setting page when you're configuring a course, for example, to indicate whether it's app compatible or not. And really what that means is it will open in the mobile browser rather than in the app. So I'm just waiting for the slide to catch up. When you install the app and open it for the first time, the first thing you need to do is actually enter the URL of your Tugger LMS. And once you've done that, you'll be asked to authenticate, and depending on your login configuration, what options will appear. So this is the meta. After they've logged in, the app displays the user's currently assigned learning they need to complete. Now, this is basically the same as the current learning block on that's available on users' dashboards when you're in the desktop mode on a web browser. So if you don't have any courses or learning to do, this will be blank. But it will display a link off to the LMS for you to find more learning to do, and that will open in your web browser on your mobile device. For each learning component that's shown, it displays the appearance image. It's quite important to have that configured for each learning component, the name of the element, the description, and the completion percentage for the user on that particular learning element. There's also four icons at the bottom, and first one is to give you access to the current learning. The second is to view any downloaded SCORMs you made available for offline use, and the third is any notifications that are pushed out to the app will be displayed here. And the final is allowing you to view your profile and then log out of the app. By the way, you can there's a toggle between carousel view, which is where our learning will be listed, or so you scroll left, or this view like this, and it does indicate to you what type of learning it is, like a certification program or course. So if you are looking at a program or certification, it provides a summary tab showing you your progress on it, summaries, description you provided for the certification, and an option to link off to the courses in the particular certification or program. It also displays the due date if one is being configured for you for your assignment, and the list of courses. Now, as programs and certifications have a range of different sets of courses, these are laid out vertically with horizontal scrolling carousels for each set. So what do you see if you're looking at it from a course point of view? Something very similar to the program and certification view. You see an overview. You can see your progress you're making. If you're allowed to see your grade, you will see that, and you'll see your course summary. You can actually then click in to view the activities. And when you're viewing the activity list, this is broken down by section, providing an indication of user completion for each specific activity, as you can see here. And you'll be glad to know this is the final slide of this presentation, really. And this is what, if you're viewing a SCORM activity, you have an option to download the SCORM for offline use if you want to do that, but you can still access the SCORM. By the way, if you are going to have use SCORMs for use on the app, you need to really make sure you test it first, so it's compatible with the SCORM native app player, because it might not be. Other activities, for example, this is a quiz example. You can see that this is accessible in the app, but that will only be available when online. So that is it. Johnny, over to you.
Thank you, Kenny. Hang on, fingers are tired from typing the responses to questions. We've got one here I haven't responded. Can SSO be used to log into the app?
I would imagine yes, but you might have to use the web option, jumping into your web browser, logging in there and logging back.
Okay, brilliant. So use the login type. Okay, that's fantastic. I think all other questions have been answered. Appreciate we're right at the end of the session. If there was any other questions, do let us know very quickly. If not, you have our contact details. Got your account managers. I think most who are here already probably have Kenny and I's details. If there's any questions you do have, do feel free to get in touch. Do remember we've got these other sessions that are running. On Thursday, we've got Tatara Engage. Really excited to kind of share the potential that it has for organizations. Thursday 25th with Tatara Perform. And just want to say thank you all for taking the time out to join us today. Hope you got something from that. And we look forward to seeing you on future sessions as well. And thank you, Kenny, for your time. That was really insightful. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Cheers.